go into the...
And I'm Dan Raymond, as you will find out anyway. I was in the 8th Air Force, but right now in my role as treasurer, we have $606.54 in the bank, plus the fact that $52 was picked up today on the raffle, which is going to be... These raffles are a really wonderful thing. Tom Pugh is the one that said we should do it, and we were scraping along. We usually had about $100 in the bank. And since we've had the raffles, we could afford to buy this PA system, and getting this Yamamoto exhibit into the Bayshore Mall is being paid for by raffles. So I appreciate the activity you guys have engaged in, and I appreciate everybody participating in the raffle. There's one book we had, it came back 2 or 3 times, and it gets profitable. And it reminds me of the beer that Daniel Freitas brought one time. I think we raffled that thing for about 6 months. And then somebody, you know what they did? They drank it. And it was a terrible thing. I'm not a beer drinker. Anyway, what happened here today is it's my job to find the programs, and last month I didn't do it, so I'm the program. It's you're stuck with me. You gentlemen back there might want to move because you can't see from where you are. Well, that's why I said you couldn't see, therefore it must be the best seat in the house. Oh, yes, Gene.
Could you get Congressman Riggs' fax number and his address for it in a minute?
I can do that. Yeah. The first little thing I've got to show you is the logo, or the insignia, the herald, if you will, of the 389th Bomb Group, and I brought that for one purpose only. I'm going to get kind of backing into something here, but I love the fact that they called this, first they called our group the Sky Scorpions, and nobody liked that name, and so then they changed it and they started calling it the Green Dragons. Now, where did they get the wonderful name Green Dragon? It was a nearby pub in the little town of Wyndham, and that's what they named the group after. I mean, this is logical sort of thing that we really need to do, is name an operation like a heavy bombardment group after a pub. I thought it had a lot of class myself. And another thing, just to set the stage, and by the way, on these things I always put them on upside down and backwards, and we might get it straight after a while. Oops. Well, I'm true to what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the crew. I'm going to refer to these guys now. The crew was actually not constant. Okay. About as good as we can go. The crew was not really constituted exactly like that. This gentleman right here, Bob Dalheim, was our bombardier, one of the best bombardiers that ever walked the face of the earth, I'm sure. He was a good man. However, Bob, one February, you had to have 4 hours to get flight pay, and one February he had a terrible cold, and he flew anyway with us, and that was his last time because he broke both eardrums coming down. We had 2,300 gallons on board, and we stayed up as long as we could, but we eventually had to come down, and when we did, why, that was kind of the end of that. This is Chuck Devlin. He was the nose gunner. Chuck lives in Cherry Hill, New Jersey right now. He has one thing that's kind of nice. I understand he's wealthy. Joe Dufault was the tail gunner. Joe flew about 13 missions with us, and at that point he said, that's all she wrote. I can't do it any farther, and so we had a replacement tail gunner. This handsome brute is me. I was a flight engineer on this particular airplane. My rank was tech sergeant. This is Bob Sherwood. He currently lives in Sun Valley, Idaho. He was the armorer And it was usual for a flight engineer to fly in the top turret. However, Sherwood wanted to, and I didn't particularly care, so we made a change, and it worked out very well. Al Novich lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. Johnny Lindquist was the radio operator, and Johnny was also a tech sergeant. He passed away just about a couple of years ago now. I write to his widow every week. This is Art Smith. He ended up as the CEO of a paper company as a CPA, but he was the navigator, really a splendid navigator. Dwayne Hall was the pilot. He was a model of how a commanding officer should act as far as I'm concerned. He called the other night, about a week ago. We talked on the phone for 2 hours, and this happens every once in a while. And I asked him, I said, Dwayne, did you ever give an order to anybody? He said, not that I remember. He completed his career flying, first of all, at Korea. He was flying C-54s, and then later on he flew B-47s. I think he had a small stroke about that time, and he was grounded, was an engineering officer, but he retired a few years ago, and he lives in Rincon, Georgia, which is right close to Savannah. And I might tell you, he has not seen the 8th Air Force Museum yet, and I can't understand that. This is Nick Haddle. He lives in Longmont, Colorado, and Nick, he was, again, these two pilots were some of the best people I've ever had anything to do with. I don't talk to Nick but about once every 3 weeks, and we're going to go spend some time with him this summer. Great people. Bob Dahlheim died of cancer about a year ago. He followed Mike Cassee by spending a lot of his time, I guess, in Barth. He did go back to combat. He was on B-26s, which flew low, and he got shot down. So anyway, I just wanted to show you the crew a little bit, and what I wanted to do today was talk about a couple of things. First of all, a lot of you guys know a lot about these air forces and how they were organized during World War II. I thought I would take about 3 minutes to talk about that. Then I want to talk about these mysterious markings that you see on the sides of these airplanes, give you an idea what they meant. And then I thought I would talk about a mission that we had to central Germany one time, where we got our butt shot off, and I thought it might be interesting to you. So let me proceed with that. Oh, I have one more thing here too. We had in our, well, no, go this next. We're going to do this upside down and backwards. No, hey, how about that? I'm very proud of myself. This is how we're organized. People today don't realize that we had 21 air forces during World War II. For instance, the 1st Air Force is where you went to cadets, and the 1st Air Force is where you went to mechanic school or radio operator school, etc. The 2nd Air Force was a training air force where the crews were melded into crews. And so on. The 4th Air Force was in defense around here. As a matter of fact, it was mainly fighters. Getting up to the 8th Air Force, the 8th Air Force was the first attempt to come up with a strategic air force. It flew in kind of in concert with the 9th Air Force, which was a tactical air force. That is, the 9th Air Force was hooked up with the ground forces, the ground assault. But before they invaded Europe and stuff, the 9th Air Force did cooperative missions with the 8th. But the 8th was designed as a strategic air force, and it was taking the mandate that was made at Casablanca at a conference there with Mr. Churchill, Mr. Stalin, and Mr. Roosevelt, where they determined that the 8th Air Force function would be to destroy the capability of the German Reich to wage war. And therefore, the targets that the 8th Air Force attacked were primarily factories, railroad marshaling yards, petroleum refineries, that kind of thing. We didn't just go out and drop on cities like a lot of people think we did. And under the 8th Air Force, there were 3 divisions, and prosaically, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The 1st Division, strangely enough, was called the 1st Division because it was the first one there. I can't understand that kind of reasoning. This, that's backwards. This is the cover of a book, by the way. That is a 1st Division airplane, and some of you guys will recognize it as an obsolete type of airplane that some people were unfortunate enough to have to fly in. It was called a B-17. But if you were in the 1st Division, you flew in a B-17, and you could always tell 1st Division because they had the triangle on the tail. That happens to be a 379th Bomb Group airplane there. That's probably Dick Daniels sitting in the nose of that airplane. So the 1st Division was all B-17s, and the 2nd Division was all B-24s. Now, upside down and backwards. Well, no, backwards. Yeah. Yeah. That is a 2nd Division airplane. Now, the 2nd Division started the war by having a circle on the tail. The 3rd Division had a square on the tail. Like the 100th Bomb Group had a square D, just like the electrical switches some of us are familiar with. But the 2nd Division, in the spring of 1944, went to another way of designating their airplanes, and what they did is they put fancy color schemes on the rudders. Now, Dick Tosh brought in a model of an airplane here, a B-24J or H, and his tail is painted as it was for the 491st, Dick? 490th. This particular airplane is a Pathfinder from the 389th Bomb Group. I say it's a Pathfinder because a couple of interesting things. The B-17s all had ball turrets. The B-24s in the 8th Air Force lost their ball turrets because of a directive on the 1st of March, 1944. The ball turret caused the B-24 to fly a little bit tail-heavy, and it caused us to use something like 4 degrees of trim tab, which meant we had to have more manifold pressure, which meant we had less range. And also, besides the mere weight of the thing, was an extra crew member, and the fact is that the ball turrets weren't that effective. And so this airplane, you look at it and you say, wait a minute, as you know, or you may know, B-24s had a retractable ball turret, and what's that thing? This particular airplane is as I say, was a Pathfinder, and that was a radome that came down. The airplane was equipped with what they called high-frequency Loran, or a Mickey. It was called a Mickey squadron. This squadron did nothing. They were all lead ships, every one of them. And I wanted to show you that because I wanted to show you something else. The squadron designator on these airplanes, and this is the part that people don't understand. This is the squadron. This is the airplane itself. It's kind of dim there, but there's an M there. Actually, it was painted in yellow. This tail was black with a vertical white stripe. I'll show you. I've got a little bit more definitive something on that, if I can find it. You know? Yeah. I'm talking here about that upside down. Hey, how about that? I should have a round of applause for that. This is the 300. Thank you. This is the 389th Bomb Group. And in the bomb group, if you looked at an airplane and you saw YO on the side of the fuselage, you knew immediately that was a 564th Bomb Squadron airplane. EE was a 565th, 566 was RR, and 567 was HP. And then on the tail, a 564th airplane had a J, for instance. J doesn't mean anything there. I just picked a letter of the alphabet. And the 565th had a minus sign over the designator on the tail. They called it bar J. The 566 had a plus sign, and that was J plus. And 567th was J with a minus sign underneath it, or J bar. And as an example of that, here's another picture of an airplane. This is one that His contemporary today, this airplane actually flew the war in the Indian Air Force, but it was, thank you, Merrill, but it was rescued by a guy named Dave Teichert, who brought it to the United States and then sold it to a fellow named Kermit Weeks. It happens to be painted with the colors of the 389th Bomb Group. Notice it has RR on the fuselage, and if you can see it, there's a yellow R in back of that. The black tail with a vertical white stripe, and on the top of the right wing is a circle C, just like the old designator. And this is what airplanes in our group looked like. And I have to show you one more picture merely because I have to show it to everybody all the time. This is B+. This is arguably the finest airplane of the entire World War II. That's us. It just looks like the other picture, Shirley. It's this particular airplane is the airplane to which we were assigned. George Cockman wouldn't understand being assigned to an airplane, from what he said, but we were assigned to this airplane, and most of our missions took place in this airplane. And I was very proud of the fact that this airplane survived the war. It survived our crew. It survived 2 more crews after us who flew until the war was over. And my top turret gunner Armour finally returned to the United States riding in the nose turret of this thing and saw it off to Kingman, Arizona, where it was scrapped. It was a very lucky airplane. It was named with a very strange name. They called it the Little Gramper Jr. And what does that mean? The original Little Gramper was one of the airplanes that went over with the group. We were replacements. But the group was sent down to Benghazi in Libya to participate in the first Ploesti mission on the 1st of August, 1943. And while they were down there, something was biting everybody, and nobody knew what to call this thing, so somebody started calling it the Little Grampers. Oh, you've been bitten by a little Gramper. And so they named the airplane, just like they named the group after a pub, they named the airplane after this biting insect in Libya. That airplane finished its tour and became an assembly ship for the 491st Bomb Group, as a matter of fact, and it was scrapped in 1945. The airplanes with that designation were very lucky because they had all kinds of things happen to them, but they didn't kill a lot of people, and they survived the war and were done away with by plans rather than by enemy action. So I thought one more thing I would do before I got too boring. Talk about how these things... There's an airplane with a circle C on the tail, and I thought I would mention how these missions started and what happened with them. The first airplane to take off was an assembly ship. This is an assembly ship. This happened to have the name, you'll be surprised, the Green Dragon. Those airplanes were fun. They were really kind of fun to fly if you ever had the opportunity. That was a B-24D, and it has no top turret, it has no ball turret, it has no tail turret, it has no guns, it has no bomb racks. In fact, it has nothing except 4 good engines, toothpick propellers, and they used to cruise at about 260 miles an hour. They were hot. They were nice airplanes, but the first airplane that would take off when a mission was starting to go out was the assembly ship. Now, that particular airplane, I formed on it one time at night, and that airplane had a red arrow that flashed on and off on the side of the fuselage, and then a great big red C that flashed on and off. And they would sit up there in orbit, and you would look for an airplane that looked like that, and shooting that color Very pistol flares too that we'd been briefed on looking for, and they formed the formation on these assembly ships. And every group had an airplane that was painted in this sort of garish sort of fashion. I don't know what the 1st Division did or the 3rd, but that's what we did. When we took off, the weather in England is beyond belief, as you probably know. A lot of you do anyway. When we took off, what we did, we had a crosswind runway that was about 6,000 feet long. That was our longest runway. We had one that went into the wind, but it was only 1,000 feet long, so we didn't use it. But when we took off, the first airplane that would, after we marshaled, you know, we'd marshal head to tail, and the first airplane would sit there and wait for the green light from the Caravan, which was a little kind of like a house trailer with an Astrodome on it. And he would park his, he would set his parking brakes, and he'd run the engines up to war emergency power or whatever he thought he needed to get off the ground. He'd be sitting there with the thing full bore, and when he got the green light, well, he'd release his parking brake, and off he went. When he got about halfway down the runway, the next airplane did the same thing, and it started when he was about halfway down the runway, and about the time the first one was breaking ground, why, the third airplane was starting its takeoff. Wanted to get off as fast as you can, so we usually had about 3 of them on the runway at one time. And right overhead at Hethel was a thing they called Buncher 6. It was a radio beacon, and we would have been briefed to assemble at 22,000 feet in Buncher 6. We'd go up there and we'd look for that airplane. We'd form our combat box formation around that airplane, and as soon as the box was formed and the time was right, that airplane would leave, and they'd all go back down for coffee, and the combat lead would take its place. It was a highly orchestrated thing, and the thing that was so remarkable to me is that we didn't kill each other, because we're climbing up through overcast that sometimes was pretty darn thick, and we just didn't seem to hit each other. I don't remember ever. And as a matter of fact, in letting down, we sometimes let down over the wash, and we've heard airplanes go by, which is too darn close, but we never got hit or never hit. What's wrong, Merrill? You're yeah, it was, actually it was pretty hairy. So with all of that, oh, by the way, I have one other thing. It has nothing to do with anything I've been talking about. Merrill, put this on there, would you please? And I want to move along because it's getting to be like 1:30. This is one of our officers. You probably remember him. He was the big movie star, but he was actually a hell of a fine man. And the fact that he was a movie star didn't go to his head. He was the deputy wing command, and the 2nd Combat Wing was based at Hethel at a place called Ketteringham Hall. And those lucky folks were right underneath our takeoff path sometimes, and I can just imagine trying to get any work done in that building with B-24s going over 25 feet over the roof. But Jimmy Stewart was a good man, and we were fortunate enough to have him fly with us a couple times. We were always surprised because we thought he was a bird colonel, that he'd be flying with us as command pilot, but he never did. He just kind of sat there and enjoyed it. By the way, the definition of a combat mission, if nobody's ever given you one, it's periods of intense boredom punctuated by periods of absolutely terrible tension. And when you got into the combat part of the combat mission, why, everybody was so darn scared they didn't know what to do, but they did what they were trained to do, I guess, is the answer. So I want to talk at this point. I'm done with that, Merrill. I want to talk at this point about a mission that we did on the 7th of